Okay, welcome to the second video. As you can see, I've been hiding all the parts that have been unwrapped separately. The reason I do this is just for myself to keep track of how much of my progress, just to see how much I have left to unwrap. It's just easy, one glance and you can tell, oh, there's some small parts around. And another big reason is you don't forget anything like this. You might overlook that small little bolt or little box that's hidden somewhere, and if you hide the big parts, which could be covering them, then you make sure that you don't miss anything. So I tend to work like this: go over all parts separately, hide them once they're done. So just some small easy parts I have to unwrap here. See, most of the time I can just get away with, for these easy ones, with an unfold. All I tend to do is stitch it a little bit, because unfold tends to make strange decisions sometimes about how it's how it stitches the edges together. So there we go. Using my hotkeys, I just checked them again to show you, so I set them to Shift S and Alt Shift S. Move that one apart. And, you know, sometimes I'm not hiding parts right away. The reason for that is because I want them to be clumped together a little bit with other parts, so I can create these blocks of UV islands. Also, once again, always remember to use the to turn off the normalize clusters button. So there we go. I selected those two together and hit unfold at the same time. Why? Because those parts are exactly identical, and I don't think they deserve separate mapping space. One thing that you really need to try and do when unwrapping something as complex as this is you need to share as much UV space as possible. If you can share something, just do it then. You'll notice that if you look at the UVs of vehicles from a professional game, that they also do this. They really share a lot of stuff. Reason for this is you get better UV space, less work to create them, and it's also just less pain when baking and everything. So this part's a little bit annoying to do. You can see that bend at the bottom. So there's only one way to fix this. I have to do this manually. Select everyone, but because I have my hotkeys, it doesn't take too long. Just select an edge, hit Shift Alt Shift S, and it stitches them immediately. Detach that one. And I can't just stitch that right away, so I'm thinking what I'm going to do here. Same deal as I did at the bottom. And then I just select each two vertices and hit the align on both axes button, and then hit Ctrl W to weld them. You might think it's not necessary to weld them there, but it just reduces the number of vertices in the final model, since every UV split will also result in a model split. It's just a part of how 3D real-time rendering works. So we have that part done. Now I need to unwrap the shifter. As you can see, it's a little bit of a problem. It's not working fine, but I tend to use unfold anyway on these more complex parts because it never hurts trying, and I can also select separate parts easier. It's better. Weld those together. Okay, I might want to try relax on this, I think. There we go. Face angles, and that's better. We can do something with that. Just manually rotate it upright. The problem is, relax changes your scale, so be wary if that happens. You're going to manually have to fix the scale again. I'm using the checkers. If you select the checker pattern from the drop-down list in the top right, then you can get a temporary preview checker pattern on your meshes. Helps to judge UV scale. Okay, so the steering wheel. This one's a bit of a tricky one. I mean, might not be exactly clear how you do something like this straight away. And let's see. For the steering wheel, I'm going to select that loop, break it apart, and perform a relax on it. But as you can see, let's put my seam on the front. I'm going to see if I fix that. Now just the center of the steering wheel. I'm just going to do a planer on those. I want to share those though. I have to stack them on top of each other. These little boxes, they came out okay with the unfold. They're just a little bit misaligned towards each other, so I'm gonna have to do those. Align all those verts back together again. You might be thinking, am I not deforming the geometry here? No, you're not, because they all have the same shape. So if you average out every position, you still get the same general proportions. There we go. And see, I forgot two edges on the back of one of those. I'm gonna have to remove those. If something like this happens, I'll try to finish the UVs first because, well, I'm at it. I don't want to step out of doing this and break up the workflow. Quick planar map. If there's one UV tool, well, one UV mapping method that I use most of all, it's the quick planar map. And there we go. Move those into position. And this one's a little bit more tricky to get right. I'm gonna have to manually position that. Now align all the corners. Rotate it upwards manually and start aligning these things into the correct positions. There we go. I'm gonna have to find something to fill up that steering wheel with. Also, one thing that I haven't mentioned that I'm doing all the time, as soon as you see me complete a separate UV group, like the steering wheel now, I tend to move it somewhere away from the center. And the reason I do this, once I attach everything together and I leave them all around the center, all of them are going to be stacked on top of each other, and it's going to be a huge mess to just sort these things apart. Imagine it like a huge pile of junk and you have to filter through it. It's a lot easier if you don't pile everything together, but instead spread it out over a large area. So that's the reason that once I've unwrapped something, I move it away. Also, just keep in mind, don't move everything towards the same area. For example, here I'm moving all the stuff I'm doing now to the top right. Sometimes I move it up, sometimes bottom left. I just tend to move it around. Of course, inevitably stuff ends up covering each other, but it's not so bad that I can't go and manually sort it out. So here you can see me manually moving some stuff to align it. Why am I doing that? Well, because I'm going to use the align tool once I can select them all at once. There we go. That's easier. That little bolt. Yeah, this unwrapping here makes no sense at all, so I'm gonna have to do that manually. A cylindrical unwrapping, but I have to turn off normalize map. Here we go. I think I prefer the seam in another position, but we'll see about that. Yeah, I'm gonna try relax, and edge angles is doing a bad job. And I have to reduce the iterations. That's a little bit better. There we go. Sometimes you have to tweak relax to make it work. So you saw me turn down the iterations, because actually relax just goes over it many times, performing the same operation, sort of stretching things out more towards the shape it has in 3D. It doesn't always work, so if you have problems like that, it can help to turn down the strength of your relax by reducing the iterations. There we go, that one's in wrap 2. You can see what I'm doing. I'm not doing the engine too quickly because it's a difficult part. Well, difficult, not really difficult, it's just going to be boring. Same work all over. I just prefer to show all these separate parts because they show the techniques without dragging on for too long. So for example here, I decided it's best to unwrap these in 2 halves. Reason for that being the seam you'll get in the center is a sharp area anyway, so you won't notice so much if there are texture seams in that area. There we go, relax. And it's a little bit hard to puzzle them, so let's see what I do. Move this one in between there. That's not working also. Yeah, something like this might work. There we go. I can still mirror if I find it hard to puzzle later on. Okay, so what's next? The wheels. Yeah, I've explained how I do wheels before. Oops, hit the wrong key there. And I'm just going to follow the same approach here. These are actually easier than there we go. And you can see if you open the text tools through the open editor button, you get different colors also. I prefer to work with those, but I just don't always remember pressing the button on the text tools dialog. Yeah, here I'm having a little bit of a struggle with Windows 7's snapping options. If you move your dialog box to the top of your screen, it maximizes the window, and sometimes you don't want that. I think it's a handy feature, but sometimes it gets in the way. So anyway, yeah, it's really important that, especially for cylinders, that you turn off normalize map, because otherwise it's going to stretch the proportions of your cylindrical map, and that's something you definitely do not want. You can tell how long this stretch of UVs is compared to how short and compacted it was without normalized UVs off. And another thing you have to watch out for, if you do a cylindrical map, it tends to not weld the verts at the end. So what I'm trying to do here is move these parts out a little bit. I've done a cylindrical map, but some faces are perpendicular to the mapping angle, so to fix these things out, I'm manually moving things around a bit. just stretching this so I get more UV space for the perpendicular rows of polygons. And apparently something went wrong here. Target weld fixes things up quickly. There we go. Welded those end parts. Alright, so this is still the rim of the front wheel. I still have the wheel to do. And it's going to be tricky because I don't plan on doing the same thing as I did with the rear wheel. I don't want to have a planar mapping from the side here. Why? Because this sort of old school thin tire doesn't have a text on the side. So I'm just selecting some edges, and if I move these out, then I get more UV space for them. There we go. Weld those parts. Yeah, I turn on a checker pattern, but it's not really working very well. That's a bit of a problem. If you work with the unnormalized UV space, then your default checker pattern to check things with can end up being too small scale to work decently. There might be an option to change that, but I'm not really sure. Never really found out about that one. So there we go, that's our wheel. That wasn't too hard. Just remember that for this sort of tube shape, you can apply cylindrical mapping and then manually move the edges around to fix things up. Sometimes there's just no other way than manually going in. And see, actually, unwrapping isn't that much of a drama sometimes. I think it's fun to sometimes solve challenges like this. Many different parts, many different approaches I have to do. It's not the most glorious work there is, but hey. Yeah, and all these spokes for the wheels, you didn't see me do, you saw me scale them up. Well, the reason for that is they're all stacked on top of each other because they're an instance, and if I do something like an unwrap or whatever, a planar map, then they're all going to be pulled apart and they won't be stacked on top of each other exactly anymore. So I'm just scaling it manually. They're just spokes, so it really doesn't matter how their UV scale is. You'll barely notice the texture on them anyway. So those little spikes at the wheels, I think it's best to unwrap them in such a way. There we go. And I'm thinking what sort of mapping I should do on these. Unfold. That looks horrible. Probably best to do a cylindrical and align it to the right axis. There we go. This isn't the best unwrap, but it's a simple part and you won't notice so much, so it'll do. Hide the selected unwrap parts. So what's up next? Yeah, the big front, I won't call it an axle, the front suspension axle. So this is actually a spline, and apparently yeah, there we go. I've attached a little part to it, and the spline is still unwrapped. So this is a very important thing. I've told you this several times during modeling. If you have a shape that you start out of a spline and you don't modify it too much, please, for the love of God, for your own sake of not doing too much work, just hit the generate UV coordinates and check the real world map size button, which is essentially, it is exactly the same as unchecking normalized map. Real world map size means it uses the units it has in the view here, in 3D space. So see how quickly that axle was unwrapped just because I checked those buttons. It really was a breeze to do. So there we go. That's a simple part. I can also perform an unwrap on this one, and this isn't really to my liking. It's again, it's detached them on strange spots. I prefer them to be stitched at, yeah, over there. That looks better. And don't ask me what the logic behind this is. I mean, same part, and I stitched them in a different position. If I do it like this, I can align them together nicely. Yeah, this one's making no sense at all, but then again, it's a little bit of a bent shape, so I don't mind. But we are going to have to fix this manually. Stitch. Move those verts around a little bit. Yeah, it's best to stitch them on the other side. I'm just thinking about where my seam will be positioned. So there we go. I'm not putting too much effort in straightening out the UVs on this part, just because it's so small, and you'll barely notice the difference. Oh, that's better. I'm also not bothering with the seams there, because once again, it's so small, not worth my time. And I'm going to stitch that one there because it's a bigger seam that's hidden if I do it that way. And once again, same type of part. Stitch and stitch. There we go. That looks quite compact, so brake hub done. Height selection, there we go. Next up, the brake discs. It's kind of annoying I have to retype those options all the time, but I think that's a bug that's been fixed in newer versions of the text tools. So I just did an unfold, which works fine. And I'm going to use the align to straighten those out. Rotate that by 90 degrees. I'll stack these on top of each other because it's a bit of a tough shape to, well, it's so long and so small. I don't think it's worth wasting all that UV space on. I won't be doing any special unique unwrapping on those parts, so I can get away with this quick shared UV. Height selection, there we go. Okay, let's see, what other annoying part do I have to tackle here, because I'll be honest, most of these are a bit annoying in shape. Especially the small clumped together boxes. There's not much challenge in those, but you have to put some effort in them. I think I'm best off taking the annoying ones on first. Yeah, these are simple, I'll just do these. There we go, done. That wasn't so hard. And sometimes I get bored of some songs, so I have to skip a few. But we're back at work now. Unfold, and huge convoluted mess I get here. This is gonna have to be done differently. I'm trying to figure out how these parts are aligned towards each other, and how they're built up. You can weld those. There we go. So I'm attaching all these to one part here, just because it's easier to work with the shape then. I'm probably going to have to return to that because think about the smoothing groups and the normal map problems you have. So I have to be honest, I forgot a little bit about it here. Sometimes if you're so busy in wrapping you don't think about those things, but I think later on during baking I'm going to return to those and fix them up a little bit. But also sometimes for parts as small as this, where the player or the viewer will maybe see 10 pixels at most of these parts, it might not be worth separating the UVs and making the texturing harder for you. Yeah, these two parts are the same, so I'm just going to stack them on top of each other. Zoom in very close and fix that up. Okay, so there we go, that's another part done. Collapse it, like always. Remember to do that. I just can't move on before I've collapsed my unwraps. It's really this automated thing I tend to do all the time when I'm unwrapping. Yeah, and here I realized that these shapes aren't really quite optimized yet, so I'm just target welding some of these inverts. I'm doing this prior to unwrapping because they could get in my way. I'm only doing it for the vertical ones. The horizontal ones are needed for the bend modifier on top. But what I am doing is I'm adding the unwrap under the bend modifier, which is going to make it a lot easier for me to unwrap this part. So as you can see, it's done an okay job. I have to fix it up a little bit. There we go. I'm selecting all the top parts. And stitching them together. There we go. It's way easier to unwrap this if you leave this straight and don't apply the bend modifier. It's a great thing about Max. You can just use the modifier stack for stuff like this, make your life easier. So I'm thinking now, same deal here. This one's pretty visible. I'm gonna have to detach these polygons to make the normal map work. But for the moment, I'm just gonna move them apart. I'll get to that when I'm packing the UVs into a few sheets. There we go. the shocks at the front. Do an unfold on them. When working like this, it's easy to turn on the sync to element checkbox at the bottom right there, which means you select them by UV island. It's just like selecting by element in Edit Poly modifier. And I'm stacking these on top of each other because they do need unique UV space. Same deal for the separate parts. There we go. Collapse and hide selection. So there are some more small parts I have to do around here. I'm seeing if I can avoid them by doing something more interesting first. Because really, I do think some parts are interesting to do. For example, the exhausts. We'll get to those in this video. Those are really cool to do. It's a really special, tricky way of unwrapping I have to do there. But those boxes and bolts, ugh, not fun. So the headlights are up next. And I'm going to try a few things on this because it's sort of a spherical shape, which is a bit difficult. You can do a planar on them for hemispherical shapes, and then it's being a little bit annoying. It's changing the scale. That's my problem. Let's see what I can do about that. I'm probably just gonna have to do it and fix it manually. And fold is not working. That's also not working decently. And I guess this is the best I can do for such a hemispherical shape. It's gonna have a seam, but the seam will be hidden on the inside, so that's not really a problem. It's a strange shape, but it provides a small amount of stretching only, so I think I'll go for this. I still have some weirdness here. Now what I'm manually going to do is scale those outer edges and move that into position. So we got most of the headlight done, so we can hide them. The lenses, I'm going to do those separately because I really try and keep the parts that will have opacity, just like glass. I try to keep those separately. I don't want to unwrap them and stack them together on the same sheet as metal parts. Just makes things easier shader-wise. So let's see what's up next. I think I'm going to tackle these exhausts, and this should be interesting because this is a really difficult shape, and you might learn something from how I unwrap this. So the first look, it looks okay, but there are a few problems. We have some sort of very weird stretching, and it looks like the critical parts, those where the two exhaust pipes meet, are a little bit jumbled and messed up, so I'm gonna have to fix those manually. And yeah, it looks like the rest of that is okay. And it seems like those extremely stretched parts are the ends of the exhausts. I'm not really sure what that part is. I'll figure it out. I'm just gonna move those out, and that looks a little bit more handleable already. Also, just keep in mind, this sort of unwrap here exists already because I turned on the generate mapping coordinates and I turned on real world map size in the spline options. If you don't do this, then unwrapping these parts will take about 10 times as much time as it would like I'm doing it now. So as I said before, if you have these cylindrical tube, this sort of shape, then you don't want to unwrap them all bent. You want to unwrap them as a straight piece because it just makes a lot more sense, and the stretching really isn't that bad. So I'm putting all these parts apart and having a look at what this exactly is. These need to be moved up like that. I'm going to align those to one line and then weld them. It's a bit hard to tell lengthwise how the distortion is actually behaving. I'm going to have to look into that. There we go, that looks okay. So right now I'm just sorting out all the polygons that get shifted a little bit, that are in the wrong position. I'm just moving them and placing them correctly so that I can just get to puzzling everything together. So apparently something went wrong here, which is quite normal because this part was modeled almost entirely custom. It's not derived from the spline in any way possible. Well, a little bit. You can see there are still some quads left, which is good because it would be tricky to fix it otherwise. Stitching something onto it doesn't work. I'm gonna try and figure out also what part belongs where. I think, yeah, the top ones are the shortest exhaust and the bottom ones are the longest exhaust. I grouped them like that. And just what I have to do now is fix up these connecting parts. Something strange happened there. It can be pretty hard to make sense out of what I'm exactly seeing here. I'm really trying to figure out what each polygon is because they all look very similar. Okay, so we have those parts. Those are attached there. So that means I can do an unfold on this. And yeah, the unfold, it makes more sense. There we go. Now this unfold is stretched and it's all crooked, so we're gonna have to fix that up. I'm just gonna detach these part per part, and on those I will perform a cylindrical mapping because that's plain easier to work with. There we go, that looks okay. So it's a little bit crooked also, but you can live with that. And you want to have these points aligned. Yep, that looks looks right. You see how invaluable these align tools are just to fix those things up. And yeah, I can't I can't stitch them. It's refusing to let me stitch them. And also you see the scale has messed up a little bit. I'm not too sure what happened here. And it seems like they're also offset slightly, so I'm just going to weld those together and move these so all the polygons line up. Detach that and stitch this together. There we go. The verts jumped a little bit. I'm gonna have to fix that. There we go. Weld those. I'm just doing it manually. If the lines don't have any aliasing going on anymore, then I can be sure that they're straight. I'm just going over each line, click, 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 using the align tools to set those up correctly. And I'm trying to stitch these together also. And as you can see, again, the cylindrical mapping is offset a little bit, so we're gonna have to fix that. And I'm probably, yeah, I need to do that manually. Using synced element to subtract from selection is pretty easy also. Move these into position. And again, I'm going to use the align tools to get everything on the same line. It's just quick and easy. And then weld those points together. There we go. So now we have the biggest stretch of the exhaust unwrapped. All we need to do is get that little connecting part fixed up there. And that won't really work. So as you can see, that's a little bit of a problem. There we go. This part will probably be a bit more tricky to get attached. Align those, there we go. It's always neater if you do it like that. Manually set those into position. And I'm not too sure what's happening here. Align those, weld. And I think, I'm not sure what's happening here. Yeah, it's a little bit of a strange part. So this one, for me, would make more sense to weld onto the other UV island for the exhausts. So there we go, that's pretty much the base unwrapping for this exhaust. We're gonna have to do the second one, so it's the same thing all over, but once you have the technique down, then it shouldn't be too hard. And see, I thought this one was fun to do. It's a challenge. It was interesting to figure out how the puzzle works, and it came out really well, the unwrap there. So same deal here. I'm going to deselect those parts, and we're going to do a cylindrical mapping. Why? Because, well, also those polygons are cylindrical. Yeah, and as you can see here, it's something I did wrong in the other one. You have to align the cylinder as good as possible. Just rotate, hit fit. And if you rotate it like that, you can move the seam line. Alright, so we have this one left. We have to straighten these parts out a little bit because, as you can see, the cylindrical wasn't perfect. Since it's not aligned to a specific axis, we have some trouble with this, but luckily we have some nice tools at our disposal to fix this. So what I need to do now is align all these specific vertices with the rest of the exhaust polygons. And there's a slight offset here. Also it's mirrored, so I need to fix that. I'm going to weld those. Switch to polygon mode, easier to select. And since I want to leave the opening of the exhaust on the seam, because why am I doing that? Because that that seam will be in the least visible area of the exhaust. So naturally you don't want your seams to be too visible. And welding these together. Voila. Now we need to attach the rest. So quickly just detach that. Just using scale and move to get this into position. This is all really just estimating, and there's no real bulletproof proportions will be correct method in this. I'm just eyeballing it mostly. And then again, usable logical UVs are more important than 100% proportions. These proportions might be, I don't know, 80, 85%, but the unwraps are the best method you can follow for this, so that's what matters. Obviously I need to mirror that part. And I'm just welding all of these, stitching all of these into place. Yeah, we get a little bit of problems there. I'm not sure what's really happening. Unfold, there we go, you see? Those two looked like they were regular polygons, but apparently they were twisted strangely, so need to fix that. And some very strange stuff going on here. There we go, that's better. I'm just welding these points. This area is hard to make sense out of. So I'm just welding everything into place, how it fits, and then after that I will adjust the proportions so that it works. So there we go, that's our base unwrap. I'm not gonna put too much extra time in arranging them, since they're pretty big parts. Well, for the engine, they take up quite some surface, but they'll be rather visible, so that's for later. Well, we need some tweaking done here. Just trying to make sense of how the polygons work. And also I might want to move my seams for those parts. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it because they won't be so visible, but move those a little bit. This is really just tiny tweak work, which is hard to get right because obviously it's all in your own judgment. As I said, the checker pattern won't work because of the scale. Yeah, and to fix my seams, I want to put my seams all the way at the back where you won't see them. So I detach this part and then stitch these together like that. I can move these around again, makes more sense. Same deal here, I want to move my my seam as well. That's better. Seam's hidden at the back now. Same deal here, I want to move my seam over there so you don't see it. And there we are. Okay, so there's some of that junk left up there. Still have to do that. It won't be too difficult. It's just some cylinders. Unfold mapping on those. And obviously these rings are not something I want to be working with. That has to be done differently. So move these into position. Align that part. Detach, and I'm going to be stitching all those parts together. That's the reason I created those hotkeys. Using my align tools again. Yeah, of course I need to mirror that. And now I can just go over to stitching these parts. Yeah, and I'm making the split here because of the normal maps, so... And same boring job here. Detach. I tried to flatten, but that didn't work. Oh, I need to mirror these, obviously. Stitch, 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 stitch. There we go. Then align the vertices. And detach these because there's a normal map smoothing group there. There we are. Now all I have left to do are the pieces where it attaches to the engine itself. And that fits together nicely. Okay, so these 4 final parts. For some reason, a few have been unwrapped wrongly in the center there. I'm not too sure what this is about. But for some reason it's giving me problems on a few sets of these polygons, so there we go. If I unfold them manually, some problem with Max, if I select too many parts together, it can't perform a correct unfold on all of them. So that looks correct too, and there we go. Now I have to align all these parts. I just want to stack all of these on top of each other because it's the same type of geometry. I don't need to create unique unwrappings for this. Try a quick planar map, there we go. And it's easier to do it this way. See, the stack is working nicely here in this case, but not with these. As you can see, it doesn't always work for me, so alright. I'm gonna have to align them. There we go. And now they are aligned over the same axis. I'm trying to make sure that the same polygons align everywhere. There we go. I want to unfold these together, and there we go again. I get those problems, so I'm just going to undo that, and then I get even more problems. So if I hit unfold manually each time, it almost stacks all of them on top of each other. Just a few problems. And also, you know, the reason why I'm checking that if it's the top polygon for every one of those rings is because if I bake ambient occlusion for these parts, and the unwrapping just jumps around all the place, for one of them it's the top, for the other one it's the bottom, it's not going to make sense. You'll clearly be able to tell that something went wrong with the ambient occlusion, so that's why I'm putting some care into aligning these things correctly. So I hope you see what I mean. I don't want any offsets on where the cylinder, the seam is, to get correct global illumination for correct illumination in the global sense with the ambient occlusion. And for this one it wasn't correct, so that's what I'm fixing. That seems about right. Exhausts unwrapped. So that's been pretty much it for this video. I'm not going to unwrap too, of course. Back to the symmetry. Won't be doing too much in this video anymore. I hope I've showed you most of the workflow I follow for UVing. For the first time, I'm going to be skipping a part here. The rest of what you see here, I won't show you how I unwrap that. Mostly it's just the same. Break it up into small parts, use planars, cylindricals, try to do it efficiently. Relax tool is important, and think about your normalized scale. So the next video I'll be showing you what happens when you have everything unwrapped separately and how you bring things together. Well, just a little one to close things off. This was really easy. The unwrapping on the lenses is just a planar. And again, the link for these tools, if you want to get to it, I will show you that in the description of this today's, well, this hot rod day.